Todo el mundo.
But that was really
1981. Rock.
I was lonely alone and too long on my own. With a hellfire heartbeat, with a heart of stone. Well, she spied me from the sky, and she tried to catch my eye. When she did, she really dug her talons in. Well, baby, she's out for blood. Well, baby, she's out for blood. I should have turned and run the other way.
Hey rockers, this is Stacy Lane Wilson, author and editor of the Rock and Roll Nightmares book series and director of the films The Venture, Stars on Guitars, and The Second Age of Aquarius. Rock and Roll Nightmares, the podcast, explores the dark and mysterious and sometimes funny side of music from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond. But that's just a jumping off point. Think of it as a 45 record you bought for the hit you know, and then going to the B-side and discovering something really cool and unexpected. On this lo-fi podcast for hi-fi people, I will be interviewing, sometimes by myself, sometimes with a co-host, musicians, authors, artists, and filmmakers. Enjoy! Today's guest is a multi-talented lady and a very good friend of mine, Brooke Lewis-Bellis. We've collaborated on so many fun things, but one of the most recent projects is the sci-fi rock and roll comedy feature film that I mentioned a second ago, The Second Age of Aquarius. Welcome, Brooke.
Stacy Lane Wilson, one of my beautiful besties. Thank you so much for having me. Of course, we're going to laugh and cry and have so much fun. And before we do, I have to acknowledge you. Listen, Rock and Roll Nightmares podcast. What the what? And is there anything that you, my beautiful bestie, Stacy, cannot do and do not do? So let me acknowledge you for all the listeners here. She is so multi-talented as well. It's one of the things that we love each other for and bond on outside of our personal relationship. This woman is unstoppable and is so creative in every way. Stace, thank you for sharing your creativity with me always. And you inspire me. And I'm so grateful that we get to not only be besties, but work together.
Oh, well, I sound like you built me up a bit much. The only reason I really started this podcast was because I have absolutely nothing else to do.
Swear for all the listeners, like total, like full disclosure, spoiler alert, even before we just started recording, like Stacey and I are like, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, I'm pulling 15-hour days, producing, acting, doing voiceovers, auditions, and media and everything else. It's like nutballs. And so is Stacey. And of course they're going to mow the lawn right now. Let me shut the screen door here in my office, in my freaking home. But truly, like there's nothing that you and I don't do. And even like for all the people who have experienced Hollywood here, for all the no's and all the slam doors in our faces, like it's a Virgo thing. I mean, we are truly tenacious, right? And we don't give up, and our souls, and that's another thing we just bond on, have to be creative, Stacey and I. And so we make it work, man. And we really do. And kudos to you for another venture. Pun intended.
So indeed. Well, I mean, to those who only know you superficially, unlike myself, you are known as a sci-fi siren, a scream queen, the creator of Ms. Vampy the Vampire. So the role of Tawny Stevens in Aquarius is a little bit different from you. When my co-writer Darren Smith and I wrote her into the script, she was just basically a voice on the phone. So I love how you collaborated with Darren and I to bring her character to life. So can you tell our listeners who Tawny is and how you kind of created her from the inside out and why you like playing her.
1000% to all of it. And so let me just say to the listeners, like, and I want to, because we talk real talk, Stacey and I, and we're going to talk real talk with you guys too. Like, you know, Stacey obviously, like she said, knows me inside and out, and knows my passions and knows my weaknesses and knows my upsets in the industry, you know, from New York to Hollywood. And so I truly I am so blessed and grateful to have had the Scream Queen, you know, moniker or title bestowed upon me years ago. It's one of the first things that Stacey and I met upon and bonded on, you know, our horror world, but we also bonded on our mainstream media worlds and our mainstream love of films and such. And so it's so funny how I've been in this industry as a professional working actress, especially, and then producer for 25 years. And so, right. And so like, it's always so interesting. And you and I talk about this off air too, what we become quote unquote known for. Right. And so I have just totally gravitated toward the films that I loved as a kid growing up, which we'll get into, and the Scream Queen stuff and the horror and sci-fi stuff 100%. But I started my professional career at 21 years old in New York, off Broadway, Tony and Tina's Wedding. I did that show, you know, the mobster comedy for 3 years, 7 shows a week. And so those are the roles why I bring it up to segue to the second age of Aquarius that I truly, truly love. And listen, I'm a character actress. I may be, and I humbly say this because I don't think it anymore, but back in the day, you know, they called me the sexy character actress. It is the character roles that as a trained New York actor, I love so much that fill me up creatively. And Stacey knows this. So of course she's so skilled in writing me the most amazing roles that I can sink my teeth into. And so I miss those fun, funny, quirky, charactery roles that I used to play in New York, like in Tony and Tina's. And I was given the opportunity to do it in another comedy not so long ago at, when I got to do, oh my God, my brain is like a total brain fog right now. I'm like skipping around all over the place. But Half New Year that Drew McInerney, who will also mention, shout out to, has a role, right, in the second age of Aquarius. So he wrote me the Pam DeLuca role there. So I just love these. So when Stacey had a conversation with me, and I remember, and to share with the listeners who are the filmmakers, you know, she had the film financed, then lost some of the financing, things like with so many projects go in circles and ebb and flow. And I remember we were doing a signing at Dark Delicacies. Shout out to our second home, Dark Delicacies, Del and Sue. We were doing a signing, right, of Stacey's other creative idea, She-Venge, which has become amazing, both as a charity donation project and also a film, which is an incredible anthology for those She-Venge, women revenge, like horror lovers and thriller lovers. Shout out to Psychotherapy. So I remember the moment to share that we're sitting in Dark Delicacies. And, you know, let me say this too. Stacey's one of my best friends. I'm like an emotional basket case. I'm like, I wear my emotions like on my sleeve and cry a lot and scream a lot. Stacey is the most even keeled, calming force that I don't even know what else to say. Like, I thank God for you and my friends like you in my life, because you're so calm and you're sharing with me. And I will remember that, like, you were upset. You were really upset and disappointed. And I felt so awful. I was like, oh, wow. This is a real true passion project of Stacey's, because I can feel her disappointment. And we talked about it. And the first thing I said was, oh my God, I'm so glad that you discussed this with me. And I had a recent opportunity to partner with a couple other like small investment, this one company that we brought in that I connected Stacey with for some small financing. And then I was able to put a bit of money in. And so, of course, with me staying committed to what I do as an actress producer, and that's I have to act in it. And there were no, you know, roles originally that were suited for me, other than you said to me that day, well, you know what? There is the voiceover of the mom of the lead, Alberta. And, you know, we could embellish that. And so, segueing back to your question, so I said, send me the script, because for me, and Stacey's the first to attest to this, it is all about the script. It's all about the screenplay. It's all about the writing for me, beyond being about working with incredible people who, and that is such a commitment of mine going forward. We have to work with people who respect and honor one another, who support each other's creativity and their strengths. And so Stacey sent me the script that very next day and said, I have a couple ideas here so we can embellish it. And first of all, it was the first time I'd read the script, and it was just perfect. It was exactly the type of script. So shout out to you and Darren Gordon Smith, that I gravitate toward outside of horror, the kind of script that made my heart sing literally and figuratively, that bring me back to the ones, the indie micro budgeted films that were the festival darlings when I first started out, early on, the late 90s in New York, mid to late 90s, right out of college, when those films like the Brothers McMullen, and then, cut to like Welcome to the Dollhouse, Todd Solondz, like, I'm very much into those heartfelt, low budget indies with, I say, art and heart, and creativity and uniqueness. And that is what the Second Age of Aquarius has. And so I fell in love with the script. Stacey and I had a meeting about it. She's like, here's an idea. I'm like, well, okay, so this is brilliant. And if Alberta's originally from New Jersey, who knows Philly and Jersey more than me, and we could do this, we could do this. And this fits right into the universe of the space that I love to act and play in as a character actress. And what I also had been committed to with my reps in Hollywood here is opening up to the roles of playing like a young mom, these young mom roles that Hollywood didn't give me the opportunity to step into just yet, because I'm still playing sometimes like the late 30s, and so I'm playing, mid, 10 years younger than I am, and so I really had this opportunity to step into a role that I wanted to, that suited everything that I love. And so here we are with Tawny Stevens. So Stacey and Darren embellished this role for me, create like a supporting role as Tawny Stevens, the ex sort of wannabe, but was, and you'll learn so much more about that in the book that we will talk about later and be releasing. And so she is the ex, right? The ex video vixen, and hysterical, but the comedic kind from New Jersey that brings Stacey and I back. And listen, I mean, I was a young girl in the early 80s. I mean, I was just entering my teens, right? And so, but that was the best era. And I know we'll talk about that too, but like that video vixen, and rest her soul, like Tawny Katane, those beauties, those rocker beauties with the big Jersey Aquanet hair and the,
Yes.
right? And the fashion that Stacey loves so much, and the fishnets and laying on the cars, and like, I mean, my first car, and Stacey and I bond on cars too,
Oh, yes.
was like a Camaro, a red Camaro. And
It
so,
doesn't
and that
get
was
more 80s than that.
it really doesn't. And that was the very late 80s for me. And so, or late 80s, early 90s, really. And so all of the love of that we implemented and embellished and put into this role. Thank you. And of course, Stacey knows my personality so much and what I love. And that, and it's funny because of course I opened the conversation when we were off air with, hi, honey, and it's, it's the roles I love so much. So thank you so much. So that is that. And we could talk a million years about the Second Age of Aquarius, that I am so proud. We just had our world premiere at Zed Fest. Thank you so much. And it is just such a sweet, fun, beautiful piece. And I got to do the comedy that I love. And thank you for believing in me for that. And these two leads, from Christina Kauf to Michael Ursu, these genius young, they're not even that young, but they're younger than me. And I got to play Alberta's young mom. And really, it was so perfect casting too. So there's so much more I love about it, but I will shut up and turn the floor back to you.
Well, I do want to touch on how, she was not really to be seen originally in the script. She was just going to be a voiceover role, but we got to actually have you on camera for it. And Allison and you came up with 3 distinct, really cool looks for Tawny. So can you talk about how you guys crafted that together?
Oh my gosh. Well, obviously we always defer to our director. So let's shout out to Allison Noel, my makeup artist, who's phenomenal. And we defer to the director, which was Stacey. And so we kind of, I think, all collaborated together with your vision and Stacy and I, and again, I'm laughing because we'll talk about the book later. I'm super excited that, we get to always walk down. I think this is something too we bond on. And I've always said to Stacy, she grew up here in Hollywood, and she was a real Hollywood kid. And I was a total Philly, Jersey, New York kid going up to the clubs in New York and stuff in Center City, Philly. And so Stacy and I always go down memory lane with the fashion of the 80s and the glamour. And so you're talking about the big hair, the teased hair, and the, fuchsia and pink lips. And right. And keeping in the theme, being creative as we do of the video vixen, the leopard pants. I had to have leopard pants in one scene. And then Stacey had this great idea for, oh my gosh, again, not too many spoiler alerts, but we have to talk about it. The rocker shirts of the 80s that were so hot. And so we found online the AC/DC and the rocker shirts to crop and cut and really create it. And then, I had this fabulous fashion flare leather crop jacket and funky flare skirt that we put on and put together for Nana's funeral in the opening scene. Right. So God, did we have fun. And so the hair, and then again, I can't spoiler alert too much, but doing also shout out to Metal Babe Mayhem and my clothing line that I was branded with years ago, which is very much rocker horror. So we chose to sort of support that and do product placement with Metal Babe Mayhem and our Rock Your Hot Mess shirts for one of the scenes where Tawny is working out with her hair in a side ponytail, which I used to wear my hair in a side ponytail all the time when I was a kid. Yeah. So, right. So, I mean, and again, Stacey truly is a fashion icon, and we both love period pieces. And in some way, this is a period piece for us.
Yeah. I mean, it's, definitely nostalgia driven with our character, Russell Aquarius, who, for those who don't know yet, he's a resurrected rock star who died in 1970, brought back by your daughter, Alberta, who's a computer programmer, as an avatar. So it's kind of like The Odd Couple meets Oliver Stone's The Doors meets Weird Science.
100%. To me, I favor the Weird Science, comparison, just because of the heart and fun and silliness.
Now let's get into the book that you touched on a little bit. As you mentioned, you are a producer on the second age of Aquarius, and we're so grateful for you because you bring a lot to the table in terms of creativity in marketing. And one of the things that Darren and I had already kind of thought of, which you helped us out with, is, unlike movies that are just one thing, we have several components. So Darren wrote a 1960s sounding score with original songs, and plus we have that companion book, Sex, Death, Rock and Roll, the Russell Aquarius edition. For the book, you and I collaborated on a short story that goes more into Tawny's backstory. So can you address the importance of world building when it comes to promoting a film these days from the producer's point of view? Because, as we've often lamented, it is hard to stand out these days as an indie production.
Perfect way to describe it. And, for all the filmmakers out there, and thank you so much for your acknowledgement, Stacey, about producing and executive producing. And, man, we learn to the nature of the low budget indie film world, and it's changing drastically. And I think that's one thing that it was projected and predicted to change, but when the pandemic hit, it went lightning speed. And so it's interesting, and I'm so thankful to be a part of the book and be able to collaborate. And Stacey's the writer here. Stacey and Darren are the writers, and Stacey's obviously, as we all know, a super talented multi-author, novelist. I am not, but I thank you for saying I do have creative ideas, which I love to entertain and participate. And so I was gifted this opportunity to write this short story with Stacey in the book. And we had so much fun brainstorming together. So we'll talk about that. But why, as a producer, I think the marketing and the value of these additional products is, if you rewind, and I've been producing, as I don't even know if people know, my Philly Chick Pictures company for really almost 20 years at a real professional level come 2022. And in some ways, we've had to revert back to the old ways of, and real filmmakers will know this, like the ancillary, products. And when you would package everything with additional products to help the film promote and make some money back. And in a very right. And now you're kind of having to go that route again with indie films, such as The Second Age of Aquarius. Number one, it's so creative that it allows for all the additional product and sales. So that's number one, that can go famously with any kind of hard copy DVD that anyone may purchase as a set, but here's why the promotion on the production side is more important than ever. And that is, how does an indie film stand out? There is fact. And I sit in my producers' virtual workshops every week. There is more content out right now than ever. And I will quote some of the biggest producers in Hollywood right now who I've been watching, who inspire me, these powerhouse women producers and men. And even last week I was doing a workshop, and this is what they say: there is so much content out there and so much good content out there, but you can no longer be good in this indie film world. You have to be great. And what creates greatness but continued creativity? And that continued creativity to promote your product comes from the books, comes from promoting on Stacey's new podcast, comes from Darren's music compilation, and so on and so on and so on. And so it is something additional that will help our product stand out amongst the millions of other indie films that will land only on streaming now, not for the lack of quality and creativity, but for the lack of distribution space to even put a film in a theatrical or limited theatrical release like I had back in the day with Sinatra Club or some of my bigger budgeted films. There's no way an indie film can even afford financially to place themselves right in that position in 2022. So we are forced in some ways, and then it's a choice, and we choose. Stacey and I again are unstoppable, and we keep thinking of creative ways to think outside the box, and that's what you're really doing in this space right now. And so all of that is so important, along with, let me say, and we both have a love-hate with social media, but and let's full disclose. In fact, recently, spoiler alert or private alert, Stacey and I had a meeting and we were talking and hanging out, and I was actually discussing, my upset and frustration with, as a producer, especially when you've got products out and I'm killing myself to promote it, often alone or with one or two other people involved in the project. And I shared my feelings with Stacey about this, and she actually enlightened me and said, I have found that frustration myself, if I may speak for you, right? I found that frustration myself. What is it with actors, and I find too sometimes with crew, that they're so behind the project at the very onset, and then once it's distributed and it is the most relevant time for us to all be pimping it out and promoting and doing social media with it and promoting one another, and yet radio silence. And so I stand behind that, how important it is for all of these things. But let me just wrap that up, and then I want to give you the floor to add to that. Let me say this for the listeners, because it's so true. My authentic artistic soul, no matter how much I am, and we all know I'm so about, like Stacey said, the superficial show of the industry and putting it, but in a positive way, putting it out there, staying relevant, doing endorsement deals, all of that. But for me, and again, this is where Stacey and I truly bond, that, and Darren and Nancy too. Shout out to Darren Gordon Smith, and Nancy Long, and all of us, and Nina Herton, our editor. It's a project like this is really about the truth and authenticity and about the art. You don't do something like this for the money, or because you're going to get into Sundance Film Festival, or it's going to be on HBO. Chances of that are like 0.001% with any film at a micro budget, right?
Yeah.
Right. So you do it because you love it. You believe in it. Your heart sings when you are involved in creating this in every way. So that's really, in the end, why we do this and what we do in a project like the Second Age of Aquarius, is to share the love of, and I hope I've been able to support that. Like Stacey said, her love of that era and Darren's love of the music that was so much fun back then. And we're trying to share that to make the world a happier place now after such a tough, challenging time with COVID. It couldn't be better. And just a shout out for the listeners to know too, in fact, we filmed my scenes early on in October, right? October,
Yeah.
November, right before we even shot the rest, because I had to go away to do a TV pilot in Reno, Nevada. I did the stripped pilot with Casper Van Dien and etc. Mark Klebanoff directed. And so we shot my scenes like so early on, like I think the beginning of November in 2019, guys. So that's what it takes. And that's the commitment it takes to bring something like this to fruition. So why not put everything you have into bringing it out to the world?
I couldn't agree with you more. Yes, it is a long haul operation. So if you don't love what you're doing, you'll be in misery for the next 2 years at least. Well, I want to kind of pivot to something in your past, which is really fun. One of your lesser known credits as a video vixen for Megadeth. Now, I remember loving Dave Mustaine's long strawberry blonde hair back in the 80s. But I've known you for years and years, and I only recently found out about that. So tell us how it happened and what was that experience like?
So, I was thinking a lot about this question. Stacey and I had talked about this off air too. And in thinking a lot about this, and I want to give an acknowledgement and kudos to you again and to myself. And again, it might be a crazy Virgo thing, but like, we really don't stop, Stacey and I. And like we do, it's so interesting. I want to just bring this to the audience attention. Like, when you do as much as we do, and in so many different arenas, Stacey as a writer, director, producer, podcaster, TV host, I mean, media writer, everything, reviewer, you name it, you do it, right?
Right.
And I have been, an actress from Broadway to network sitcoms to horror to sci-fi to indie to, and a producer, an executive producer, and a co-producer, and the list, and an author. And we do so much. And sometimes it's so interesting to me because when you are spread around like this, we do so much that like people, first of all, there's really no way for people to know or even learn, including our best friends, of all we have done. And then like there's things I forget because I've been doing this at a professional level since I'm like 21 years old. I forget sometimes even my past and all I've done. I forget to share it, right?
Yeah.
With my friends. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to share this. And when Stacey and I a while ago were talking about video vixens, and I'm like, oh, did you know? And she's like, what? So I will make this story short, but I was an aspiring actress very young in college. I was doing a lot of theater, before anything else, and a lot of equity theater and stuff. And then we're going back in the day and we're talking like, oh my God, what am I talking again? Like mid 90s. Like, so I'm 21 years old, finishing college, whatever. And there was a magazine, still is, and there's now the online version, obviously digital version, called Backstage. There was Backstage East and Backstage West separately. So the one in New York was Backstage East, obviously. Mm-hmm. So I used to get and read and pick up at the newsstand, Backstage. So I pick it up. That's how we found out about auditions back then. This is even, I think, before I had an agent. I was that young. And I see an audition looking for sexy rocker vixens who can dance for so it's through MTV. It is for MTV's Night of the Living Megadeth Halloween special. Okay. And this is like, oh my gosh, it's like 1994. My God, I'm like dating myself here. So like 1994, 1995. So it was that special. in conjunction with the Megadeth music video for, I couldn't even remember this. I had to look it up. It was the Reckoning Day was their new album release, The Reckoning Day.
Uh-huh.
So, right. So they're like, come up. It's like, you know, you have to submit your headshots and then we'll call you if we want you to come up. So, and I'm living like in Philly at the time. This is before I moved to New York, Philly and Jersey. So I get a call from the casting. I send a headshot up. I get a call from the casting and they're like, come up, auditions are Tuesday. Fine. So I go up and you have to dance and you get a personality interview and all that stuff. So I do. So 2 days later, I get a call, you've been cast. So here's what is, and I'm, you know, Stacey knows I'm very spiritual, and some of the listeners who know me will know I'm very spiritual. And I do believe, as challenging as life has been for me and us and Stacey and I and a lot of the world, you know, everything that's meant to be does happen in divine timing. I'm going to cry. I'm going to get really emotional. So you know, and I look back and I know we're all aging and I'm very emotional since the pandemic, like because of so much death and sadness. And like, I'm just trying to really live in gratitude. And I look back at all these, thank you for letting me talk about this experience because I forgot about it. It's so long ago. And I'm so grateful for these amazing experiences as an actress, as a performer over many years. And so I go up and I'm saying this because this is pre Brooke Lewis Bellis Scream Queen, aka Brooke Lewis Scream Queen, as most of you know me as. And so listen to this. So I go, so the casting director calls and says, we cast you in both the video and the Night of the Living Megadeth. You'll have to come up twice and film both, and you'll be on the show on MTV, and it will air Halloween. They film it like 2 nights before Halloween night. It'll air Halloween night. You'll be dancing with Megadeth. Great.
Wow. How does one dance to Megadeth?
Head banging, head banging bitches, right? So, and it's so funny because I was like such a soft rock girl, you know, I wasn't even like a hardcore rock girl, but like, okay, I'm in, I can dance, I'll do anything you want. But here's the kicker: foreshadowing, talk about spirituality. So the casting is casting, they get you on the phone with wardrobe and they're casting what you will be costumed as. And lo and behold, they costume me as the sexy vampiress.
Wow.
Right? Okay. Now, guys, I didn't become known as a scream queen or a horror person, you know, entity until really like 2007. The year I came out after doing a big horror film, Kinky Killers on Showtime. 2007, we shot 2006, 2007. So look how I'm talking years prior, right? Like 10 years prior. So the way the universe works, it's crazy. So long story long, I go up, I dance, they're placing me. I'm standing next to Megadeth. I'm on MTV with, at the time, the VJ. Remember back in the day,
yes.
The VJ stays. Oh my gosh, for all the MTV lovers. So the VJ was Kennedy. She was badass. I got to meet her.
Yeah.
Right. It was so much fun. And, you know, an opportunity like that, I didn't know it back then, but look at the foreshadowing again, but it gave me a credit on my resume when I was super young. It led me, oh my gosh, I then went to go on to dance for Club MTV, the Grind show briefly when I moved up to New York, like a year or two later. And it gave me the confidence that I could do this and I could be, you know, cast in something at this level. And it was extraordinary. So I'm very grateful.
I am grateful too. Otherwise, you may not have been Ms. Vampy and we wouldn't have met. So it all worked out.
It all worked out. And there's so many fun, you know, stories. Like I know we talked before and said, like, let's make this fun. And, you know, we're always going to have fun when we're talking and going down our memory lane. And so, you know, again, and I'll leave it to you, but I've had these I've done some other music videos over my career and some just stepped into for dear friends. And, you know, Susan Lanier Bramlett is, you know, like my other soul sister. And I got to be cast years later, of course, in her music video that she did, Watch What You Ask For. And it was sort of a little bit of a tribute to The Hills Have Eyes. And it was Susan Lanier Bramlett, Michael Berryman as the stars, and myself, again, playing a sexy vampiress. I was Michael Berryman's little vampire assistant. So that was a music video for one of her music videos that we did in like 2012 or 13. I mean, it's surreal. It is really surreal.
Yeah, and Sue's, you know, you mentioned her, she was in The Hills Have Eyes and also Welcome Back, Kotter, and she's a musician. You know, so music and horror seem to kind of go hand in hand. Why do you think that is?
That is really an interesting question, and I absolutely agree with you. So I think that there is something very, raw about horror, especially the gritty underground, like real raw horror that Stacey and I know quite well. I mean, listeners would be blown away by your knowledge for sure, and mine as well. I think they would be kind of shocked. And so there's something very raw, and there's something very like the freedom around, whether it's censorship or whether it's just the opportunity to sort of create in a way where you're not sort of like locked into this mainstream perception, I think. And so I think the horror actors, performers, I mean, directors too, a lot of them do have like rock bands, metal bands. I think there's a stylized situation when it comes to both rock and horror. I think there's a dark, sexy energy around it that other music genres don't have. So I think it kind of allows for a real crossover, right?
Yeah, I think so. And, I feel like people are still feeling the beat of the music of the 80s and maybe the early 90s. It still resonates with people who were there, but also millennials and Gen Z who weren't even born yet, probably. So why do you think that is, that music from that particular era still stands the test of time?
That is such a cultural question and answer. And again, part of the reason, shout out again to the second age of Aquarius, that I can't wait for the viewers to see it, because it's so intelligent, so smart, so deep what Stacey and Darren created with the generational and the crossover of generations. And so that's what music and movies allow for. And the 80s and 90s in particular, Stace, I think, in my humble opinion, we came off of such a while, and I wasn't even like, well, I was born in the mid 70s. I wasn't even alive yet, really. But like, from what I understand, such a wild movement, right, of the 70s. And then and it was really wild and war and a little dark, that the 80s sort of lent itself to this freedom, this for me. And again, I was so young, but like I was, a teenager enough to have been able to experience the 80s. And like, there was this freedom and fun and lightness, and same thing I think into the early 90s, where I really was a teenager, like, freedom and fun and expression, and like this bouncy light from the soft rock to the bands. And I think all the girl bands, I mean, you and I are so much about girl power and female empowerment, all these girl bands and the Go-Go's and oh my God, who did the Bangles? Thank you, Manic Monday. Oh, God bless Susanna Hoffs. Yes, Bananarama. Like, oh, exactly. And like it became this like girl power era, and the style and the fashion, and it never went out of style. I mean, you and I still, look at me. I live in my freaking Flashdance sweatshirts, everyone, like nobody's business, right? Every chance I get, I got the off the shoulder, because to me, that was the video vixen, fun, sexiness, but also comfort and light and love and joy and like innocence. There was like an innocence about it, and the Valley Girl and the language. And I was East Coast, so but it trickled from the Valley to us, and something very celebratory. And God, I'm like getting chills, like reliving it now, because it really was my most joyful time.
Yeah, I think that's, a lot of people came of age then. And I think, younger people today look back on that and feel like they wish they could have experienced that time before cell phones, before social media, before all these things that are so, I don't know, it's like an electronic leash on younger people today that we didn't really have back then.
100%. There is so much pressure in every way, from just, and I feel it, Stacey knows. And again, I'm always open. Like, I get massive anxiety. My nervous system, just, which already is challenged, like tweaks out, because there's so much coming at us at lightning speed. And that's a great, statement to make about the digital era and streaming films and iTunes Music and Spotify. And I feel like every minute of every day, there is something coming at us digitally. And Stacey and I laughed about this when we recently talked about this, like, even though we're a bit older than the young generation right now, like we actually are kind of proud of ourselves and how we've learned to adapt to this lightning speed of everything. But it also causes a lot of stress. Whereas I think when I was young and dancing around at school dancing around to Cyndi Lauper, and girls just want to have fun, right? And watching those movies, girls just want to have fun, that went like hand in hand with it. There was something so, again, I said it before, freedom and celebratory. And you could just feel free to dance and not care what you looked like, and be fun and crazy. And I just feel like there's a component of that that is missing in life right now. I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer right here, right now, but like, I wish that the younger generation could step into that and experience that. And I don't know if they ever will, but I pray that one day this judging ourselves, and Ms. Vampy coaches teen girls, right? Like, so I try to instill that in younger women and younger people that, it's not about that. It's about truth and integrity, and we're all guilty of this. I'm guilty of this as a grown-ass woman, but stop comparing yourself to others and the filters on social media. And we're all guilty of it, but stop, everyone. Like, try to find joy in the moment, because we just learned life is really freaking short.
Indeed, we did. And now I'm going to bring it down even further, because that's what I do. The 80s was such a deadly decade. I want to talk about that. I mean, because there was also that flip side to the joy and the freedom. I mean, that we had the AIDS epidemic. John Lennon kicked off the decade by getting murdered. There was this panic phenomenon. But I kind of want to talk about, those turbulent times do often produce some of the best entertainment related art. So what are some of your favorite darker books, pop songs, or horror movies from the 80s and 90s?
Okay. So, I mean, we would have a whole episode just around this question alone, Stace. And I think it's wonderful that you touched on it again, going back to the eras. So shout out, of course. And you and I always talk about this stuff. I mean, both Stacey and I was like in high school, like became I must have gotten a book off my mom's shelf, and we both grew up with single moms. And so freaking Jackie Collins, man. I mean, Jackie Collins is one of both our icons, idols.
Yes.
Talk about, again, I'm going to say it again, back to a women's movement and an empowerment for women when she was like crucified. Talk about dark, right?
Yeah.
And we both watched her whatchamacallit,
the documentary that's
thank you. Correct. The documentary, Brain Fog. So, and it was brilliant. And so we both love her, but man, she was like crucified for stepping in. So that was pretty dark, and her books, like, shout out to Beyond, Lucky and Lady Boss are my favorites, but Rockstar we talked about, right? It was one of your favorites too.
Yes.
So like those were, they were dark, and they actually taught me, talking about segueing back to the industry. Like, I was back east as a young girl in high school, wanting and having this dream of being an actress and living in Hollywood one day, and reading these books that were like, yes, sexy and steamy, but also kind of tragic, and sort of gave you a perception of what the Hollywood industry can be like. And man, Stacey, and shout out to, God bless, Bunny Bacon, her mom in heaven, like, you guys taught us so much about how tragic the industry can be. And you, in your books, go back to that era as well. So It really did have some darkness alongside the sex appeal and the, mystery of Hollywood. And going over to, well, wait, I have to, before I do anything, and I'm sorry, I have to go jump an era, but not really, because this will address this era as well. I must shout out to the listeners, if you have not heard, and I have to thank Stacey for being the one to share this with me this year. Stacey and I were both honored, and I still pinch myself every day. This book, speaking of books, sits on my desk in my office at home, and I'm still in shock, but that I'm in it. But Stacey and I were honored in the 1,000 Women in Horror from 1895 to 2018. Thank you, right? With all our heart, Alexandra Heller Nicholas. My goodness. So Stacey hits me up one day, and she's like, "You didn't tell me about this. Did you know about this?" I'm like, "I didn't know about this." Surprise to us, talk about a freaking honor. So everybody needs to get this book. It's sitting on my desk. I am beyond honored. We are beyond honored. It's like amongst women, like, oh my God. And speaking of era, and from Joan Collins to Elizabeth Taylor to Elvira to Yvonne DiCarlo and Karen Black, the list goes on, and a lot of our beautiful peers that are talented as hell. So there you have that. So I have to shout out to that book, but it also talks about 1895 to present, which covers a lot of this era as well. And back to movies and music. I mean, movies, and Stacey and I laugh, and Stacey and I both individually, funny enough, did like our own mini marathons with our significant others, you know, during Halloween season. And I have to go back to the movies that I love that, you know, were sort of mainstream back then, but have become cult classics now. From some of my favorites, I mean, God bless Jamie Lee Curtis is one of my all-time greats. And like Prom Night from the 80s is one of my favorite films to this day.
I love
know,
that
and
one, and it features David Copperfield of all people.
oh, how
like
funny!
doing some dark magic, and you know, it's just such a great film. A little curio that it was popular then, and then it kind of went away. And I think it's sort of an underground cult classic now.
Really one of my favorites from then, one of my horror favorites, because for me, it had a story and it had heart in it. By the way, I got to go hang out backstage with David Copperfield in Las Vegas many years ago. That's a whole other story for another episode. Yes. But speaking of magic and David, he was lovely. And yes, I was backstage hanging like a rock star. But Prom Night for me are the films I love because of the story. And recently, Stacey and I were back and forth like texting about the films we watched for Halloween. I got to give a shout out to Hell Night, baby. Hell Night, another great Linda Blair, another one of my Scream Queen icons. Go Linda Blair, who I've done the horror conventions with when I was blessed to be relevant, you know, 10, 15 years ago. And she's amazing. So, and Peter Barton, who we all had a crush on, ladies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And who else was in that? One of the Van Pattens.
I know.
Vince?
I did watch it a few years back. I revisited it, and I'm drawing a blank right now too.
I think it might have been Vince. Vince Van Patten?
I think. Oh yes, I think you're right. Yeah.
So and he's like he's in like a sex scene in bed. But anyway, I mean, but that was like my jam. And then another shout out, last but not least, we talked about this recently at Halloween too, from that era, The Fun House.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Tobe Hooper movie.
Yes. And so for anyone who is a true blue, like I am, a true blue original Texas Chainsaw Massacre original fan, then you got to see The Funhouse if you haven't. To me, it is truly, again, one of the like cult classic greats from the 80s.
And it has a message too, like you were saying, a lot of the programming from then, you know, it was kind of sad, you know, it's kind of got a little heart to it as well.
Yep. And that's why we need, I mean, especially, and you know, it's funny. I mean, Stacey and I, we've worked together so many times. We've really never gotten to do a real gritty, like full horror film together, which is so funny. We've done Psychotherapy as a psychological thriller that I love. And we've done now The Second Age of Aquarius with, you know, sci-fi comedy music. And I did your Keepsakes short years ago. That was like, you know, based on your book. And so we've never really gotten to work together, and maybe we'll have to do that one day. But that's why we need writers like you to write smart work, you know, and maybe we'll have to make a film based on one of your books, because I just think that is what is missing. There is so much crap horror out now, and that's why I think people don't respect it as much as they used to. And like for old people like us, no disrespect, and some of the listeners, you know, your elders, you're like, you know, I don't know, man, horror was smart back then. Like shout out to another one of our associates and friends, Greg Lamberson, who I've worked with many times as an actress and co-producer and executive producer now on Guns of Eden, like, you know, Slime City Massacre, which I know the title is so wacky. And when he first hit me up, when I first became a known Scream Queen in like 2007, and he hit me up with this cult classic Slime City that he did in 1988. And then we had this opportunity to do the sequel in 2008, and we ended up shooting in 2009. 89, and I was a co-producer on it and acted in it with Debbie Rashawn and Lloyd Kaufman and Keelan Patrick Burke and so many of Stacey and I's associates. And so I bring it up because, even a title like that, like Slime City Massacre, that's like a wacky title. People were like, Brooke, you just came off of Showtime's Kinky Killers, right? You just came off of I Murders on Stars, and like, you're going to go do Slime City Massacre. And when I read the script, Greg's such a great writer, like you are, you're both novelists, and so like the subtext was really intelligent and really on the page. And like, it's that kind of stuff that I gravitate toward. And we need more of well-written horror stuff because a lot of it's crap.
Yeah, it can be. But, that's what the good thing about having a great deal of choice today. It can be overwhelming at times, but then again, you can find the gems among the crap, for lack of a better word.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes, unfortunately, you really have to look hard, because there's some good mainstream ones now, but the indie stuff, I feel like few and far between.
Right. Well, it seems like the horror film has kind of segued to the horror series, like American Horror Story, or, things like that, where they unfurl characters over time throughout a series of episodes, which is also, I think, a good thing that's changed since back then in the 80s and 90s. We didn't really have horror series. They were more anthologies with standalone stories.
100%. And fortunately and unfortunately, and I'm a huge American Horror Story fan, but even those, like, you look at I'm talking like the negative part for someone like me as an actress. I mean, you're looking at A-list, you're Lady Gaga, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at like, Kathy Bates, and I could go on and on and on. I mean, look at these A-list stars that are doing, and who wouldn't want to do a Ryan Murphy show? That's like my lifelong dream, so that's where, again, the mainstream, is there. It's kind of, and I say this off air and I say it on air and I share, like, I feel like the world has become, and the entertainment business has become so much, again, of like the haves and have nots, like the rest of the world, that it's so hard to stay in that middle class zone and do quality work that actually gets a respected distribution deal, when you don't have Kathy Bates or Lady Gaga,
Correct.
or Finn Wittrock, right? Like, starring in your piece.
Yeah. Well, before I let you go, it has been a pleasure, but I do have to wrap this up. This is the...
I told you, Stace, we could talk forever. Oh my God.
Well, this is the Rock and Roll Nightmares podcast. So, of course, before I let you go, I have to ask, what is your rock and roll nightmare?
I love this question, and you did give me some prep on this one. So here's my one rock and roll nightmare, that I actually become a real video vixen, and I'm well known in the video rock world. And then later on, I suddenly appear as a Real Housewives of wherever. That's my short version, but I will share a real quick story with you, because I did prep this too, that and you had asked me when we were chatting about it too, like about a concert I went to or a story. So I have to share this, and this will be a perfect wraparound ending too, because it's positive and shows where my heart is, which I would like the world to know. And Stacey always laughs with me that I'm such a philanthropist, but when I was in high school, really young, there was a hot Genesis concert in downtown Philly, and I went with two girlfriends, and we were so pumped, and Genesis was like the jam back then, and we couldn't wait. And we knew someone who knew someone. Long story long, we were invited backstage after to meet the band. And I was with two of my best friends from high school, and this happened on a Lisa Colt Jam concert too.
Oh my gosh, I remember that thing.
Of course you do. And so the Genesis concert, we're so excited, and we get to the backstage, and they go, "You're only allowed 2 people backstage."
Oh, yeah, I've been there.
Right. And Stacey knows me better than anyone. And of course, out of the kindness of my heart, my one girlfriend started crying. I was like, go, I'll go wait in the car. I'll sit on the bench here or whatever. Like, go, you guys go. And I pushed them in. They went in, met Genesis backstage. I didn't. They brought me an autograph out when they came back out.
That's sweet.
Right. And all was well in the world and everyone was happy. But so that was a nightmare, man. Like I couldn't read
Yes.
Genesis. What the hell?
Oh man.
Oh man. What a way to end it. But let's end it on a positive. I have a big heart. I may be quirky. I may be crazy. I may be stubborn like a Virgo is, like Stacey and I are, but we have conviction, like we tell Nancy, and we have huge hearts. And I'm so grateful that I have you in my personal and professional world, Stace. And congratulations on this new show and all you do. And are we allowed to shout out to, can I have you shout out to, are we allowed to let anyone know when the second age of Aquarius releases?
Well, actually, this show is probably going to be put just right after that because I will be editing episodes, so I'll be cutting out this part, as a matter of fact. But yeah,
perfect.
So we're thinking we're going to come out February 11th, and I have to move in January, so I probably will debut the show, eke out episodes, maybe late January, early February. So we don't know where we're at, but
okay.
Okay.
Cool.
So let me ask you the last question. So where can people find you online? We talked about your social media anxiety, so let's have people bug you.
Just please no more DMs, everyone. I've had enough of 100 DMs. I do tons of autograph contests. Look on my feed. So I am at Brooke Lewis LA on Instagram, where I'm most active. Also Brooke Lewis LA on Twitter and Brooke Lewis LA on my Facebook fan page. And BrookeLewisBellis.com is my actress and press website. And PhillyChickPictures.com is my production website. And MsVampy.net or .com is Ms. Vampy. And I always say hello back. So thank you everyone for supporting me. Thank you, Stacey, for supporting my career and collaborating with me. I love you.
I love you too. And you did mention that you have some other films coming out. So before I really let you go, I want to know what else you've got coming up aside from the second age of Aquarius.
Thank you so much. Quick shout outs to, again, we're such in this crazy sort of roller coaster like world right now still, and things we shot that Stacey and I did together, like Aquarius, before the pandemic, are now still being brought to fruition. So shout out to Joshua Butler's Red Rooms, a fun limited web series that will be out at some point in 2022. We're doing the film festival circuit right now. And shout out to Stripped that I mentioned earlier that I got to star in with Casper Van Dien, Mark Klebanoff's project. I believe we are going to be shooting more episodes of this TV series, but no spoiler alerts to be had. That will happen next year and it will be out next year. And oh my gosh, I have other like private projects that I can't reveal yet that I'm working on. One big feature film that I've been working on for like a year now during pandemic. Oh my God, craziness. And shout out, like I mentioned earlier too, I forgot, last but not least, Greg Lamberson's Guns of Eden. I have been actually working as an executive producer and helping him a bit and acting in this because he is such a godsend and let me act on green screen and directed me from New York to LA during the pandemic. So I know I've been really blessed. Oh, and Kurt Weiser's, let me shout out. I forgot. I was so lucky to do this amazing web series virtually again. They're all amazing. I'm so blessed. I get to work with incredible people. Kurt Weiser's Leave Quietly. That will be out this year. And there's a lot. Wow. I mean, there's like a bunch of stuff that'll be finally releasing, but I need to fill in that gap.
Wow. What gap?
Yeah.
Right?
What gap? Because it'll look like on IMDb, like right now, it's like 2019, and then I won't have anything coming out until like 2022 here. So it's craziness, but we all went through it, and I'm very blessed, and we are blessed, Stacey, to have everything that we have at this time.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you, Stace. So much fun, as we suspected.
Yes, indeed. All right. And I will be sure and have you back, to talk about these projects after they come out.
I cannot wait. Congratulations again, honey. What a fun podcast. I'm so proud of you. And nobody has more knowledge of rock and movies and books and music than you, my friend.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Love you.
Love you too. As always, before I close the show, I'm going to share a paragraph from one of the Rock and Roll Nightmares books. This is an excerpt from the nonfiction edition, and the chapter is Tragedy. Terry Kath, a founding member and lead guitarist of Chicago, died at the age of 31. He shot himself in the head while playing with the 9mm semi-automatic pistol at a party and expired instantly to the shock and horror of his fellow revelers. The well-regarded guitarist, who also sang, played banjo, accordion, bass, and drums, is best known for his intricate solo on the band's classic 25 or 624, and he is the lead vocalist on their hit, I'm a Man. The Chicago native moved to sunny Southern California, and that's where he died. Kath regularly carried guns and did a lot of target shooting, so maybe it's not that unusual he brought a couple of firearms to the house party at the Woodland Hills home of roadie and band technician Don Johnson. No, not the actor. However, Tell Me, a song Kath sang and played lead on, was used in the final episode of Miami Vice. The man dubbed the White Ray Charles was horsing around at the gathering and showing off his weapons. He spun his .38 revolver on his finger, put it to his temple, and pulled the trigger to demonstrate that it wasn't loaded. It wasn't. Still, Johnson recalled that he warned Kath several times to be careful. His gun-toting pal just scoffed. According to Johnson, the guitarist picked up a semi-automatic 9mm pistol and, leaning back in a chair, declared, "Don't worry about it. The clip is not even in it." His last words were, "What do you think I'm going to do? Blow my brains out?" This concludes another episode of Rock and Roll Nightmares. I'm your host, Stacy Lane Wilson. The theme song, Out for Blood, is composed and sung by Lars with a Z, Cabot, and the band is Fuzzbuster. You can hear the whole track in the horror comedy film Valentine Days, also with a Z. For photos of the guests and show archives, please visit the website rockandrollthings.com. That's rock and roll with an N. You can also join the Rock and Roll Nightmares Facebook group or follow us on Instagram at Rock and Roll Nightmares Books. That's BOOKS. This is an indie podcast, so your subscriptions and ratings are really important. Thank you for joining me, and until next time,